Hi, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The FCC has released a draft set of rules for the Affordable Connectivity Program with some really tight deadlines if anybody wanted to make some additional public comments. I'll be talking about that in just a second. Thanks for joining me, Rick Uzzi here at Zecorum. So as I mentioned, the FCC has now issued draft rules for the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is taking over for the EBB, the Emergency Broadband Benefit, because that ACP needed to go into effect on January 1st, and they needed a comment, but they're still putting together the final rules, and they've issued some draft rules. And like I mentioned, there's a really quick turnaround if you wanted to make any more comments. So I wanted to discuss that today. So first off, we've got, actually let me start here. So this is the public notice. Wireline Competition Bureau announces modifications to ex parte rules in Affordable Connectivity Fund proceeding. That just means that they're talking about the rules that people can comment because they're making some changes here due to this tight schedule. So November 18th, so this is back after the infrastructure bill was passed and they needed to get some of this stuff going very quickly. On November 18th, the Wireline Competition Bureau of the FCC released a public notice seeking comment on the rules and administration of the Affordable Connectivity Program, which was established by Congress in the IIJA as the $14.2 billion successor program to the EBB program that I mentioned there, to create a record that would allow the Commission to promulgate rules by a statutory deadline of January 14th, 2022, and consistent with the congressional directive. The Bureau established a permit but disclose proceeding with comments due December 8th, 2021, and reply comments due December 28th, 2021. So you can see there was already a quick turnaround on this. I mean, we're talking about from November 18th, then getting comments, responding to the comments, replying to those. So in light of the approaching statutory deadline and the Commission's desire to receive targeted and timely input from a broad cross-section of the affected public, Chairwoman Rosenwald announces that the extraordinary circumstances exist to warrant the discretionary release of a draft report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking, including draft rules, which will be available to the public soon. Now, this was December 6th, I believe. Yeah, this was released December 6th, last Thursday, and those rules were released Friday, so the next day. So now we're talking about Monday, just after the weekend that we're talking about this. So the public may make ex parte presentations consistent with our permit, but disclose rules through Tuesday, January 11th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So basically, the public can make comments. They have to be, public comments and, like they say, consistent with their permit, but disclose rules through January 11th at 5 p.m. So there's that announcement. And then, as I mentioned, Next day here, this is January 7th, I believe. Yep, January 7th, Chairwoman Rosenwald debuts the draft rules. Released to the public a draft report and order, further notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, would establish the rules for the $14.2 billion ACP. The ACP would provide eligible households with discounts of up to $30 a month for broadband service and up to $75 a month if the household's on tribal lands. It also will provide a one-time discount of up to $100 on a computer or tablet for eligible households. And there's something that in these draft rules, they came to a conclusion there that I'll talk about here in a minute. And we've known all of this. None of this has changed. So the EBB is allowing low-income households to get a subsidy of up to $50 per month from their service provider if the household is eligible and then if the service provider has signed up for that. And there's some other changes related to that I've talked about in the past. The $75 a month if on tribal lands has not changed. And then this $100 discount on eligible equipment has not changed, although they have, again, I guess, confirmed some things that were in some of the comments, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. The response to the EBB program, with over 9 million households enrolled in less than 8 months, proved what many of us knew to be true. There are simply too many people across the country struggling to pay for high-speed internet. And that EBB program, that came about as part of the COVID relief plan because a lot of people were knocked out of work because companies had to shut down during the pandemic. And that was the thrust of that program. It was considered temporary. and it was for the pandemic. So this is taking over. This is part of the infrastructure bill, the Biden infrastructure bill. This ACP, this $14.2 billion, is taking over for the EBB, which was just a couple of $1 billion, only a couple of $1 billion. So it's a lot more money. They're trying to make this more of a permanent kind of thing. Eventually it would run out of money, but so may need to be extended. But it's supposed to, the thought is it's more permanent and it's more aimed at low-income households that are just low income versus those that were impacted by the pandemic. It's clear that the need for support continues. I made public the draft for our newest broadband affordability program to invite feedback. Congress gave the FCC a very short window to stand up the ACP, and working with a hyper-accelerated schedule during the holidays. That's the other thing, is this was all taking place right at the end of the year when people are, Christmas holiday, New Year's, etc. So that's that statement. Then we've got, I thought this article in Multi-Channel News did a good job of kind of summarizing things. FCC releases draft of broadband subsidy rules. As advertised, the FCC chairwoman released a draft of an order and further notice of proposed rulemaking that governs this program, including proposing to allow the EBB providers to automatically qualify to provide ACP authorized service. So if the provider already was providing subsidies to low-income households or as part of the EBB, then automatically they can qualify for the ACP. But despite the urging of the wireless industry, the FCC is not expanding the definition of covered devices to include smartphones. So that's what several wireless providers had said, is why can't we have smartphones, or at least tablets that include 4G, and big phablets, the big huge phones that are almost like a tablet, that why can't they qualify? And the FCC came around and said, the whole purpose of giving this discount on devices is for people that have broadband in their home but can't afford a device. So if they've already got broadband available on the device, then it doesn't qualify. That was their reasoning there. The public will have only until January 11th, as I mentioned, a comment on a congressional deadline that the FCC have promulgated the rules by January 14th, which the Commission still needs to vote on. It's not proposing requiring ISPs to turn over service plan information during the ACP election process, saying it was convinced by commentators or commenters, which included ACAC, NCTA, Encompass, and many others, that such an administrative burden would discourage provider participation. So basically what they were originally saying was that service providers would have to submit all of the plans that they're going to be providing this on, and as those changed, they'd have to be doing that, and then that would be a burden both for the providers as well as for USAC, that then has to look at all of this information and make sure that the providers are keeping up with that. But one change here that was different from the EBB. The EBB did not require that every plan would be eligible for their benefit. So you could have a low, one or two low-income plans, and that would be for your EBB customers. But you could have your higher end plans, and they would not qualify. So you would not have to give a subsidy on those. Well, with the ACP, any plan that you give to the general public, you have to have a subsidy. You have to be able to have somebody sign up for the ACP and be able to get that plan. Now, obviously, you can have your set pricing, so the public gets it at a certain price, and then if somebody who's on the ACP wants that, like a gigabit program, gigabit plan, they can get that. They still only get $30 or $75 if they're on tribal lands, but you cannot restrict. Every plan is eligible. So the FCC said, well, since every plan is eligible, we don't need to be knowing what plans this is being offered on. So they did accept that change. Then there's a few other things on here. Some of these are not any changes. Again, only one $30 or $75 subsidy per household. That was the plan from the start. Only $100 device subsidy per household. That was the plan. Mirroring its Lifeline subsidy. So the FCC said any participating household that's paying nothing for broadband service and does not use it at least once every month will be de-enrolled unless they start using it. So if somebody gets if the service provider has a $30 plan and somebody signs up for that and they're not paying anything for that and they don't use that plan, the FCC wants to make sure that they're not paying $30 subsidy to somebody who's not using it. So that I believe that was the original intent, and that has not changed. The FCC is not expanding the definition of connected device to include smartphones. It says the statute clearly defines it as a laptop, desktop, computer, or tablet, which means it does not include smartphones or devices that can independently make cellular calls, such as large phones or phablets. It says here the Congress could have easily expanded the definition but did not. The Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, the FNPR, seeks comment on an outreach partner grant program as well as on a household that's not on tribal land but in an area that is extremely high cost can get a $75 benefit instead of this $30. So the outreach partner grant program, that's something that was kind of built in here to help help the FCC and service providers and states and everybody that would be a stakeholder, help them promote this program so that people know, hey, there's a low-income program available, you can get these subsidies. And they've got these outreach partners that they want to work with, and it could be a nonprofit or somebody like that that's going to help them do this. So almost like marketing these programs. So they're seeking for more comment on that and a grant program specifically for that, so that you could get grants, that grant money that would help fund that outreach program and these outreach partners. So they're seeking comment on that, as well as on a household not on tribal land. Again, high cost areas can get a $75 benefit because that's also in here. So if you're a service provider, for example, a $30 subsidy might not cover very much if this is a low cost, or excuse me, a high cost area. So if it's a high cost area and it's going to cost you a lot more than it would in a normal cost area, then what they want to do is figure out how they can structure this and how they can track this where areas that are high cost, households can get a $75 subsidy. So what would that high cost be? That's defined in the Act in several places, but basically it would be, if it's a low-income area, that would be considered high cost because not everybody's going to be able to afford service, so you're going to have fewer customers in that area, even with a subsidy. Obviously, areas that are hard to reach, if you've only got one customer per several miles because it's farmland, or you've got a mountainous area where, again, you don't have that many customers, it's rural, plus you've got issues on getting fiber there, you're going to have to use lots of different wireless towers because of trees and obstacles, those kinds of things. So high cost is outlined, but they're trying to get comments on how to best do this. So there's a fact sheet in front of this rulemaking, so I just wanted to read a couple of things off of here. So a little bit of the background. It says this report and order, if adopted, would finalize rules for the ACP, taking over the EBB. Congress extended and made several changes to the EBB to transform it from an emergency program, as I mentioned, designed to respond to a public health crisis, to a longer-term broadband affordability program, and appropriated a $14.2 billion for that, what the report and order would do, and then it lists some of the things it would do in here, which again were kind of already known, but then it talks about these other further things that they're a further notice for proposed rulemaking, what they're looking to gather from that, and they're seeking comment on that, on the structure and objectives of this outreach partner grant program, and then seeking comment on a mechanism with which an eligible household in a high-cost area may receive an enhanced benefit of $75 per month. So that's what they're talking about there. And then after that, I'm not going to go any further other than read this part. So this document's been circulated for tentative consideration by the Commission, January 14th. So this is kind of going over that timeline that's so tight. Statutory deadline for promulgating the rules. C, infrastructure investment, blah, blah, blah. This issue's okay. This document does not constitute any official action by the Commission. However, the chairwoman has determined that in the unique circumstances involved in the implementation of this statute under a very short deadline, in the interest of promoting the public's ability to understand the nature and scope of the important issues under consideration, the public interest would be served by making this document publicly available. So that's kind of the forerunner of this entire document. Then there's 150 pages and almost 300 paragraphs that you're welcome to read through. So I'm going to link to this. Lots of commentary back and forth on what some people proposed from the initial comments, the FCC's reply to that, and then some of the information about some things that they said, for example, the cell phones and the phablets or tablets even that are 4G capable, that those do not apply. So they've got a few things that were kind of newsworthy in this as well. And then there's, I'll go ahead and link to the FCC site. Actually, this is what I'm going to be linking to because you have to download these. So I'll be linking to this. We can download the statement, the draft rules if you want to look at that, and then the public, well, the draft rules are the big document, thinking about it, and then the public notice right there. So I will link to that. So Again, if you're going to be participating in the ACP, it might be interesting for you to at least check out some of these documents. Maybe this was helpful for you just to know that these things are happening. So the final rules will be coming up here shortly, because it is a very quick turn. So by the 14th, I think they need to get things in and then vote on this by the 14th, and then I think you're going to see the final rules, which I expect will be pretty much what you're looking at on these draft rules, with the exception of maybe a couple of these things that they're gathering comment on. There might be something added for that, so be looking for that. Thanks for joining me. Hope you like this. If you did, give me a thumbs up on the video. Go ahead and subscribe. Click the little bell if you want to be notified whenever I'm live. So thanks for joining me, and I will be back tomorrow. Since it's Tuesday, I will be back tomorrow with Tech Tuesday, where I'll be talking about, I think tomorrow I'm going to do some non-broadband deployment news. So other items of interest to broadband providers, I think is what I'm planning on covering tomorrow, unless I see something else of interest. But tune in for that. That'll be tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Tech Tuesdays are always at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. So if you join me then, I'll see you then. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.